Al Jazeera says its journalist Anas Al Sharif, killed in an Israeli airstrike on August 10th, left a final message to be posted if he died. In the note shared on social media, the 28-year-old vowed he had never hesitated to convey the truth, hoping that God would witness those who remained silent. Al Sharif died along with 4 Al Jazeera colleagues, an assistant, and freelance reporter Muhammad Al Khaldi when a tent near Gaza City's Shifa hospital was hit. Medics say 2 other people also died. Just minutes before his death, Al Sharif posted that Gaza City was under intense bombardment, warning that if this madness does not stop, nothing will remain but rubble. Israel's military claims Al Sharif led a Hamas cell involved in rocket attacks. Al Jazeera, funded by Qatar, strongly rejects that, calling him one of Gaza's bravest journalists, and the attack this desperate attempt to silence voices. Al Sharif was previously part of a Reuters team that won the 2024 Pulitzer Prize for breaking news photography. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Gilad Hirschberger. He's a political psychologist at Reichman University, joins us live from Israel. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, how do you see Israel's justification for targeting journalists as terrorists impacting global perception of this conflict?
I think it's important to understand, first of all, that Hamas controls all of the flow of information from the Gaza Strip. What this means is that it is impossible to function as a journalist inside the Gaza Strip without having some kind of affiliation with Hamas, or at least without having their consent, because otherwise they will not let you work as a journalist, and they will not let you disseminate the information that you collect in the Strip. So there's really no way of operating in the Gaza Strip as a journalist without the consent of Hamas. Now the question is whether this specific journalist only received the consent of Hamas, or whether this is someone who is an active member of the terrorist organization. We know since October 7th that journalists and terrorists are sometimes one and the same. Unfortunately, we've seen that during the attacks, there were AP journalists and Reuters journalists who were not just covering the attacks, but were actually part of the attacks. They were participating in the attacks. So the distinction between journalist and terrorist becomes quite blurry in this situation. I don't know what is true, what is the case with a specific journalist, but it is important to note that the distinction is not always that clear.
And now, since Professor, you have mentioned that it's very blurry and we cannot, it's not easy to make a distinction between these journalists and terrorists. So what steps can Israel take to balance this military actions to protect the journalists in conflict zones?
Well, I think that, first of all, Israel is definitely incurring a great deal of PR damage as a result of hurting or killing journalists, regardless of whether we know that they're actually Hamas activists, because as far as world perception is concerned, these are journalists. Most people do not understand this blurry distinction that I mentioned before, and simply think that there are journalists and there are terrorists, and these are different people. Of course, Israel has to do everything that it can to avoid harming any innocent civilians, and that includes journalists. But because some of these journalists also moonlight as terrorists, then it may be inevitable in some cases to target these people and suffer from some publicity problems abroad.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. Now, Palestinian terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's assassination of Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza, including correspondent Anas Al Sharif. In a statement, Hamas said the attack was part of a widespread targeting of journalists unprecedented in any war, aimed at silencing media coverage in Gaza. Hamas called upon the UN Security Council and the international community to condemn the killings and hold Israeli leaders accountable, describing Al Sharif as a symbol of free journalism. Meanwhile, the Foreign Press Association has also condemned the killing of Palestinian journalists in Gaza City, saying it is outraged by what it described as the Israeli military's targeted killing of journalists who were reporting on events as they occurred. The FPA also called on Israel to cease attacks on journalists and allow reporting to continue freely. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Professor Gilad Hirschberger. He's a political psychologist at Reichman University. Thank you, Professor, for staying with us. Now, Hamas also condemned this Israel's targeting of Al Jazeera journalists. How significant is this condemnation, and what impact could it have on international calls for accountability if it holds any power?
The Hamas condemnation is not only ironic, it's almost amusing in the sense that they are upholding the value of free journalism. It's important to remember that Hamas is as far as anyone can imagine from the values of freedom, from the values of free journalism. Hamas came to power in the Gaza Strip. First, it was elected in 2006, and then in 2007, it threw from the rooftops all of the members of the Palestinian Authority that did not align themselves with the agenda of Hamas. So Hamas is not exactly a bastion of free speech and of all the values that it very ironically upholds at the moment. Hamas is in a campaign, in a public relations campaign, and part of the campaign is to try to say that Israel is the one that is preventing free speech by targeting journalists. Now, I'm not saying for a minute that it's okay to target journalists, it's not. But some of these journalists, as we know, are active terrorists, and this is, this blurry distinction creates situations in which supposed journalists are targeted, but they are in fact terrorists.
Yes, indeed. It's important to remember that Hamas stating this is a terrorist organization. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us, Professor Gerald.